Cool, because I don't, at least मेरा YouTube वाला tab पे okay, now it works. It works.
शिवांशु अपनी स्क्रीन फुल कर लो.
Cool, because I don't, at least मेरा YouTube वाला tab पे okay, now it works.
delay
It
है, so I can't.
works.
शिवांशु अपनी स्क्रीन फुल कर लो.
Cool, because I don't, at least मेरा YouTube वाला tab पे okay, now it works.
Can't even get
Delay
live
works.
feedback.
That's painful.
शिवांशु अपनी स्क्रीन फुल कर लो.
Anyhow, yeah. So, hi Y20.
I am Siddhartha, and this is the introduction to competitive
Can't even get live
programming.
feedback.
ICPC. The ICPC is a bit
शिवांशु अपनी स्क्रीन फुल.
haywire right now due to
So,
COVID, but I'll try covering that
Y20,
as well so that you can
I'm
start
Siddhartha,
Siddhartha, and this is the
immediately.
introduction
So,
competitive
can't even get live
programming.
starting
ICPC.
off with what is
The ICPC is a
competitive
bit
शिवांशु अपनी
programming or
स्क्रीन फुल.
haywire
competitive
right now due to
coding.
both
So,
COVID, but I'll try covering that as well.
So,
that you can
competitive
start
coding
Siddhartha, and
is
this the
solving
algorithmic
immediately.
problems in
So,
a time
can't
constraint
even get
programming.
live for starting
Generally
off
for
with
pleasure.
What is there's a lot of I'll go over what other purposes people solve do competitive programming for, but the primary reason is usually for fun. So this is something that you will hear throughout your stay at IIT Kanpur, that competitive programming is extremely useful for technical interviews, which helps for jobs. And and the thing is that it actually is. Most of the companies that will come on campus either for internships or for placements will have a technical round which have tests which can be very easily solved with competitive programming. You also get to work on challenging problems, and it also helps with understanding the fundamentals of programming. And last of all, of course, competitive programming is fun. It's a very enjoyable pastime. You can spend hours working on problems, trying to find solutions, and working with your friends to solve questions. Is the voice repeating? Is it better now, or Shivanshu? Okay, I'll continue with the hope that they can hear me, and yeah, so right. So this is an example of a comparative programming question. So this is a very famous website, Codeforces, and this is an example of some type of questions. So basically, if you guys have done ESE 101, there are the questions that come up on ESE 101, the questions where you have to use arrays, and it involves some amount of thinking. Those are the type of questions that you usually see in competitive programming, except at a more advanced level. I mean, if you have done ESE 101, you might understand that there is the possibility for a lot more complexity. For example, you may have done sorting algorithms, and there's a huge amount of problems which have very interesting algorithms to solve those problems. So one of the most asked questions is usually, how do you start competitive programming? So the most given advice on how to start competitive programming is that you should try to solve as many problems as you can. Some people may suggest you read through books. Some people may suggest online lectures. But once you've done one basic course on programming, say ESE 101, you should be set for the fundamentals that are required. After that, the algorithms you require, the techniques that you require, the small little life hacks that help you speed up as a programmer, all of that can be gained by solving more problems. So the websites that you can use that are generally used by everyone here are the following on the screen. I did not put links to them, but if you Google for them, you should most likely find them. So these are 4 of them: Code Forces, CodeChef, and AdCoder. All of them will hold contests. By contests, what I mean is they will have a 1 hour or 2 hour long time period, and they'll give you a set of questions, say 3 questions, 4 questions, and the aim is to solve those questions as fast as possible, in the minimum amount of time and with the most accuracy as possible. There's different scoring systems which penalize wrong submissions and which incentivize solving quickly, and that is used to determine the rankings. So these 3 websites will majorly have contests where you can solve them at a fixed time with everyone else, or you can go back later and solve them on your own time. So if you don't have the time, you have something else at that point of time and you're too busy to do it, you can always go back and solve the questions immediately. You can solve the questions there. A to OJ is a bit different. So one thing that often comes up is people say that we do contests, but the questions are too hard, or the questions are something where I feel like I'm not learning a lot. What is the best way to solve a lot of questions instead of having to go through contests? So A2OJ is a website which contains a lot of problem sets based on levels. And so, for example, if you can input your rating on any of the 3 websites, and it will give you a problem set where these are problems which are not extremely hard to the point where you can't solve them, or they involve concepts which you don't know, but they also don't contain questions which are trivially easy and would take, like, say, 2 to 3 minutes for you to implement them. So someone asked, why not HackerRank? HackerRank, the UI is not that great, and they don't hold many contests, to be honest. I think they majorly have interview contests and long-term hackathons, but regular contests are not there. And again, if once you've done ESE 101, you will have the basics. So, but again, you can do it there if you want to. They do have occasional contests. These are the contests. These are the websites that we feel help the most. And the second question that people ask is, what programming language do I use? So here you might find a lot of there are famous competitive programmers that use Java, and there are contests which are specifically for Kotlin, but it's better off that you start off with C++ unless you've been programming, say, since the 5th grade and you've only programmed in Java and feel like there's no other language you need to know. You should probably be doing it in C++. Most programming competition resources will be in C++. All questions will have a solution in C++. It's not necessary that they will have a solution in Python or Java because they're much slower. And usually, so again, as a first year, you may feel like it's a lot of effort to learn C++, but it isn't really. I feel like the programming club people will hate on me, but a lot of the things you pick up in C can be used in C++. The syntax is pretty much the same. You can use the same, I believe the same code you use in C would in theory also run in C++. So there is not, so even if you feel like you just have done C in ESE 101, it should not be an issue. You will pick up the syntax is the same, the code structure is the same. These small things that you will need, you can pick up on your own over time. And then where do you write code? So this is something that's kind of an issue with IIT Kanpur students, because till now any of the programming you will have done will have been done on Pruter, and you may not know, okay, where do I write code down, where do I test my code, how do I where do I run my code once, because you won't have access. You could use Pruter, I'm not sure, but you may not want to use Pruter, obviously, for all the problems that you're doing down the line. So the slides will be shared later, but we have links on how to set up code platforms for most of the common OSs. You can also use online IDs. IDs are basically somewhere where you can write code and test it and run it, just like Pruter. So CodeChef and CS Academy, both of them provide online IDs, and both of them provide online IDs where you can write code and test it and run small sample test cases. The issue with that is if you're giving a contest, that website may face a lot of traffic and your code running times may be extremely slow because it's running on a server there, and by the time it'll take 1 to 2 seconds, which when you're doing a contest might seem frustrating. VS Code, you can also download. It's not an issue. These two are links. If you have downloaded VS Code, it's not an issue. This is just a basic few resources for some of the more common ones people I know personally use. Moving on to famous competitions. So these are effectively, I've gone over the websites which hold regular, you can say in some senses, practice competitions. All of the competitions mentioned previously on Code Forces, on CodeChef, therefore practice and for for your own fun. They don't have any stakes involved. There's nothing. If you win those contests, you don't get anything other than, say, a rating increase or decrease. So beyond that, also, there's a lot of famous programming competitions where there is prize money involved, there's t-shirts involved, there's other stuff involved that a lot of people prepare for. People will spend a lot of time preparing for the ICPC, for example. So Google's Code Jam is one of them. The registration starts in Feb and the qualification rounds are in March. The questions, at least in the qualification rounds, are something that you can attempt based on ESC 101 alone. So I would recommend that even if you're not feeling very comfortable with ESC 101, the qualification rounds, you can try looking at the questions, talking to a few of your friends. It's not advisable that you discuss the algorithm if you plan on taking part, but after the competition, you can talk to your friends and see how they solve the solution. And you will find the solutions online after the competition. The Facebook hacker and the Google Code Jam has multiple rounds. The first is the qualification. There's 3 rounds after that, with a world finals held sometime in August, I believe. The top 25 coders of all across the world compete there, and very few Indians regularly qualify. But that is something you can try to take part in and hope that you do well in. Facebook Hacker Cup is similar. It's a coding competition organized by Facebook. It has multiple rounds. The qualification round is in July. Top Coder Regionals is a regional program that happens, regional contest that happens in India. So a lot of students from IIT Kanpur end up going. And the qualifications for this are a bit different. There's a lot of single round matches that are going to be held throughout January and March. And you can take part in them, and the score that you get is consolidated, and a final rank list is prepared, which allows you to qualify for the regionals, which will be held due to COVID, it may not be held this year, but it's usually held in a physical location where the top 25 people meet up, they sit down, and a live coding contest is held. And the last is the ICPC. The ICPC is arguably one of the more famous ones. It's a college coding contest, so it's only targeted towards you guys. You don't have to worry about a lot of older people taking part and completely beating you in it. And it's a team competition, which is quite different from everything else. Every other competition is usually a solo competition where you take part on your own, you code on your own. In the ICPC, it's a team competition where there's 3 people and there's only one system. So you guys have to optimize the solving time versus the coding time, because you will have 2 to 3 people who can effectively work and think on a problem, but only one person will have the ability to write code down. And that makes it a bit more challenging, and it allows the level of questions to be much more advanced, because you effectively have 3 people being allowed to work on one single on the problems. And yeah, so competitive programming in IIT Kanpur. So the programming club has started a programmer of the month. It's been quite successful for Y19, and they plan on doing that for Y20 as well. There will be a monthly rank list, which will be based on a few of the competitions mentioned on the previous slides. So for a particular month, they may decide that which competitions will be included in the rank list, and they will look at all the Y20 students. They'll see who has done how well in those competitions and create a rank list based on that. There's also a competitive channel on Slack where most of us are kind of active. And if you have any question or any query, you can write on that channel, and most people will respond to it. So that's majorly it for competitive programming at IIT Kanpur. Yeah. So so the ICPC takes place on site, as in it's a competition where everyone has to go to one physical location, and the competition takes place there. It may not happen this year because of COVID, but I'll still kind of give you an overview of what the ICPC is, so that you have a kind of broad understanding of what it entails, how to prepare for it, and so forth. So basically, it's a programming contest for college students. There are teams of 3, and you represent the college. It's a very old competition. Almost every major university takes part in this competition, and it's been going on for a really long time. So the ICPC, the final part of the ICPC is effectively the World Finals, where the top teams, 150 top teams from across the world, take part for winning the ICPC. There's only one team per college, and the teams are from across the world. You have teams from the US, teams from Europe, teams from India. And the roadmap to how you can qualify for the ICPC World Finals is this way. There's an online qualifier consisting of 5 to 7 problems, which you have to do in 3 to 4 hours. Then, as mentioned previously, there's the on-site regionals, where your team has to travel to some location, and you go there and you have to take part in the competition in person. And it's a 5-hour long competition, and there's 10 to 12 problems. After that, there's the Asia West Finals, where based on the regional performances, you qualify for the Asia West Finals, and you take part with the top teams from across all the countries in Asia West. So India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Bangladesh, the top teams from all of these countries will take part in the Asia West Finals. And the World Finals, again, based on the Asia West Finals and the regional finals performances, the top teams will end up going to the world finals. I do not recall where the world finals are this year. So the world finals in the previous years have been, well, the last year, which got affected due to COVID, was supposed to be in Russia. The year before that was Portugal. The year before that was China. So, and then every major university ends up coming for the world finals. Across all the Indian teams are usually from IITs. You have Cambridge, you have MIT, Caltech, Stanford, all of them. Teams from there always also come. So that's kind of it for ICPC. Seniors you can contact. I've added links to their Code Forces handles as well. These are seniors you can contact, Y18s, Y19s, in case you guys have any issues or you want specific, you have specific queries. Beyond that, you in practice during competitions, you usually have the ability to see who else is also giving the competition. In the Code Forces contests, you will know who else has given the contest or has solved a particular problem. So if you see someone from Kanpur that has solved the problem and you want advice on how to solve the problem after the contest, you can contact them and there should not be an issue. Beyond that, I think this is it for my slides. I went way too fast. I'm not used to giving lectures on meets. Yeah, I'll just briefly go through other advice so on the useful websites, Code Forces, CodeChef, AdCoders, there's a rating system which based on how well you do in contests. So right, resume stuff. I'll do that in a bit. So there's, just to get you familiar with the lingo, there's ratings assigned to each user in all three of the platforms: Code Forces, CodeChef, and AdCoders. This rating essentially says how well you've been doing in certain competitions, and it's based on your performance in competitions. The more competitions you give and the better you perform, the better your rating will be. So there's all the one issue maybe you may feel is that suppose you're completely new, you've just done ESE 101 and you've just started, this is your first time coding, and there may be some people who've been coding for 7 years, 10 years. You may feel a bit scared about competing with people like these. So to avoid that issue, all three platforms have separate divisions. Code Forces has 3 divisions. CodeChef had 2, and now will have 3. AtCoder does not have divisions per se, but they have 3 different type of contests. So based on that, people will be in different divisions, and you will get problems which are more suited for your divisions. And you can move up or down these divisions based on your performance. So you do not have to worry about facing extremely tough challenges. Once you've done ESE 101, there will be problems which you can do. So you do not have to worry about more preparation before you start doing these contests. Resume stuff. Right. Yeah, so back to this, why comparative programming? When you're in Kanpur as a first year, I understand that right now is probably a stage where there's been an overload of information in terms of what you should do, what you should not do. You're going to have sessions with random seniors who are going to tell you give you 5 tips on how to get a 60 lakh LPA package. And they're all going to give you different sorts of advice based on what position they're in and what they're trying to pitch to you. If they're in a club, they'll say that people in this club are doing really well. If they're in a festival, they'll say that people in this festival end up doing really good. And a lot of that, it's hard for me to kind of emphasize on how much, while taking part in fests and being a part of clubs is useful in some senses, it's hard to emphasize how much of a role technical interviews, comparative coding helps in technical interviews, which will ultimately help you get an internship if you're looking, help you get an internship or get placed if you're looking to get placed in a tech-based industry, because 60 to 70% of your interviews will have either a coding test before it, or during the interview itself will have a technical round, which will involve questions which are extremely similar to the questions that you will be doing if you do competitive programming. And since you will be judged on that basis, at some level, this would be extremely helpful. While I don't want to overstate it as well and say that this is the only thing you should do in your 4 years, but if you are looking, want to improve your profile for internships and placements, this is something that you should at least explore doing, because this is extremely helpful. Beyond that, writing. Should you skip? Oh, 1 second. Right. Is knowing ESE till arrays, functions, loops sufficient? I think it is. I think this is before. Right. So the thing with C++ is you don't need pointers, which is, I think, the part that comes after arrays. You might need recursion, and it's helpful if you've done recursion. So if you have, but till arrays, you should be fine. As there's a lot of simple questions. The level of questions you see in ESE 101, the basic questions, those questions also exist on these websites. So you will be able to solve questions and you will be able to proceed. So one way, let's see, where do I move onwards from here? Right, go back to here. So I've kind of discussed, the basic things you should know if you're looking to start competitive programming. I've gone through, like, say, the websites. I've gone through where you actually code and what language you should use. Someone asked whether Python, they're comfortable in Python but not in C++. You should definitely switch to C++. It should not, once you have one programming language down, it should not be hard to switch. And it will be better for practice if you switch to C++, because Python is at least 2 to 3 times slower. So in a lot of questions, you may time out and it may cause an issue. So as I was saying, I've kind of gone over the basics of what things you need to do comparative programming, the bare minimum. You need the website, you need a place to write code, and you need to know what language to write code. You're going to be doing ESE 101, so you will know how to write some code. Now, the question that's most commonly asked is, how do you proceed beyond this? What is the strategy you should take to learn competitive programming? Because you cannot just solve questions blindly, because otherwise you may end up solving a lot of trivial problems which don't actually help you learn anything or help you improve. So that is where A2OJ is extremely helpful. Try giving out a few contests on Codeforces. That should help you figure out where your rating is and what level of problems you can solve. Once you figure that out on A2OJ, you can find problem sets based on your rating. Say you have a 1500 rating on Codeforces. You can go on A2OJ. It'll give you a list of 100 problems you should solve if you're 1500 rated. And doing that is, you can go through that and you can solve those problems in order. And you will, by going through the problems, going through the editorials, going through the code of people who have solved those problems previously, you will kind of build an understanding of how to solve more problems. And going through the editorials, you will understand which topics you may want to study more in theory to understand how the problem should be solved. Because there's not a lot, because studying about something in theory is one thing. Being able to implement it and start understanding the small nuances is a different thing, which is why it's recommended that you don't get too deep into the theory at the beginning, because there's a lot of theory and it's easy to get muddled up in the theory without taking the time to implement things. And it's better off you start with the practice first. Then, of course, you're going to be busy in IIT Kanpur. It's a fact. You will have courses, you will have club activities, and you may not have the time at all to sit down and do contests, because the contests have a fixed time. They will start at 8 p.m. They will end at 10 p.m. If you're not there, you can't give the contest with everyone else. So the two options are either you give the contest later. You can sit down on your own time, solve the questions, back solve it. You won't see any ratings increases or decreases, and you won't get feedback on how well you're doing. But it's a good way to practice. The other is that CodeChef offers long competitions which span for a week. And so you can sit down whenever you have the time across a week. You can sit down, try solving problems, spend an hour or two on figuring out how the problem works, and then sit down to implement it, even if you're not free at a fixed specific time. Right. That's it. Is there any point in learning if I'm in other branch? So again, I don't want to break people's dreams and stuff, but the majority of people I've seen in Kanpur do end up taking jobs which require some amount of tech background, no matter which branch you are from. There are some people that choose to stay in the departments they are in and choose to do works, but a lot of people end up going for non-core jobs, in which case it is helpful. And again, most of the people that do competitive programming are not necessarily from CSE. I was in maths, and I was in eco before I had my branch changed, and I used to do it then. After I'm in maths, I still do it. Lots of people in aerospace, chemical, all of them do competitive programming. And if you're interested in a tech profile, it ends up having a competitive profile, programming profile helps immensely. What else do I cover? I think, Darshi, do you have any recommendations? For people who haven't done ESE 101, I would suggest you wait for ESE 101 to so for ESE 101, I would suggest you wait a few weeks of wait to do a few weeks of ESE 101, because it'll be extremely hard for you to sit down and code without having the basic understanding of, say, if-else loops, if-else blocks and for loops and things like that. So if you have, I understand that half the branches will not have done ESE 101 till now. You can try waiting for a few weeks and wait till you've done, say, till for loops and till arrays, and you have a basic fundamental understanding of how those works, to move on to starting on these websites. Again, it's not a requirement, because if you've been on campus, you may have been doing some level of coding, some PClub projects or robotics projects which have involved coding. So it may not be difficult to understand, but for the extreme basics, I would still say you can wait till ESE 101. There's no issue in starting late. You don't have to have started in the first year to be good at competitive programming. Our team, which qualified for the World Finals last year and the year before that, we all started in our second year. We had other priorities in our first year, and we did not do any competitive programming. Is 12th grade knowledge enough? 12th grade knowledge of C++. Yeah, 12th grade knowledge, I've not done it in 12th grade, but I think the amount of stuff you've done in 12th grade should be sufficient for comparative programming. I've covered strategy, I've covered competitions. Yeah, I guess that's it. I can take a few more questions if people have questions. Sorry for the erratic talk. Unless Darshi has suggestions on something major I've missed.
No, I don't have any suggestions. I'm just looking for questions in the chat.
Then is it like, do we just devolve into Bulla Katna for 20 minutes? I answered the other branch thing, suggesting practicing coding on ESE 101. Code Wars, I'm not sure what is Code Wars. I don't recall Code Wars. Top coders, again, they have nice competitions. Their web app is horrible. It's not the best web app ever, and you may not. It's not fun for a beginner. Setting up the web app, trying to use it, and the contest style is also quite different. It's a lot more punitive, and it's a lot harder to get correct answers on Topcoder because of their format. LeetCode is majorly aimed towards interview preparation. So the main difference between interview preparation and competitive programming would be that comparative programming people are trying to prepare for competitions, and they end up trying to do, and given the time constraints, they try to do harder advanced problems. And interview problems may not reach that level of toughness. You want to try to cover a breadth of problems that may appear in an interview and try to solve them as quickly as possible. So lead code effectively helps you with that. It's more based towards interview problems, which you do not need to be doing at this stage unless you're preparing for internships or placements. But yeah, ESE 101 seems tough. Again, it's basically practice. The faster you are at figuring out what the problem wants you to do, the faster you are at actually implementing it. That is how you grow. You need to do more problems. Once you've seen 5 problems of a certain type, it's more probable that the 6th time you see it, you're going to be able to catch the trick that much faster. And once you've implemented it 7 times, it's much more probable that the 7th time you're going to be implementing it much more faster. So if yes, again, it boils down to practice. There's not a lot of theory. I mean, there is theory, of course, but the theory, of course, is not extremely helpful at a beginning stage. Right. Yes, after ESC 101, try code forces, try the various contests. So the one benefit of contests is that it's interesting to see your ratings. There's a certain amount of motivation that competition gives you that is not easily achieved through practice on your own. So it's recommended that you try to give a few contests, because that is what will primarily give you motivation to actually improve further. When you're doing it with friends and you say, I mean, there is a certain thrill in doing, say, better than a senior you've always admired, or doing better than your friends, or doing better than, or having a huge increase in your rating based on your performance. So try a few problems, try a few contests on code forces. Then when you want to sit down and actually practice, you can do it on A2OJ. Because without doing it, without that motivation, you'll go on A2OJ, you won't really have fun. You'll kind of get bored, it'll seem like a chore, and you won't want to do it. For code editors, so I'll be sharing the slides later. Hopefully PClub will be. And the slides have links to the various IDs that you can set up quickly. PClub probably also has other guides on how to implement, how to set up IDs, but So for the links that I've given, these are specific for competitive programming. So the way you would want to set up an IDE for development is slightly different than how you want to set up a IDE for competitive programming. Because one you want to do for development, one you want to write a small piece of code as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible.
Yes, so that is what we usually do. Like most people I know, they have a separate IDE for competitive programming, like Sublime Text, and they have a separate IDE for development purposes.
Right. And yeah, someone said Python. Python is slower fundamentally as a language. If you write a piece of code in Python and you, so um, one major component of competitive programming is having a program solve a problem in a certain amount of time. Because again, to make sure that you've solved it correctly, you'd want the program to run in 2 seconds. If you have a program which runs in 1 year, it doesn't matter, right? So there's time limits are a very important thing, and Python is slower than C++. There are exceptions made to time limits in Python, but usually what happens is that um, the time limits still end up not being very accurate, and it may be possible that there is not even a solution in Python because the time limit is so bad that whatever you write in Python will be so slow that it will never run on time. So at least for competitive programming, you don't really need to know Python. Once you've picked up a language, Python is not that hard to pick up in general. So if you have other interests, say you have an interest in machine learning, then yes, you can learn Python. But for competitive programming, C++ is recommended. There's effectively the best way to put it would be, again, unless you've been working in that specific language for 7 years or more, you should not be using that language. You should be using C++ for competitive programming. You may wonder whether you may want to think about what other languages you need. I'm not saying don't learn Python ever, because it has uses beyond. There are uses for programming languages beyond competitive programming, obviously, but for competitive programming, C++ is the way to go. And right, is there any other question that I have missed? Do I see any hacker? Do you remember anything in this, Tarshi? Do we turn this into a Rams hate session?
There is one question: how to debug problems. I don't think that has any proper solution, but if you have anything.
How do we debug solutions? One second. Topcoder does not have an IDE. So what Topcoder has is, so the, yeah, I just realized I shouldn't play around with the slides. The issue with Topcoder is that even to submit, they have their own applet. So and that applet takes a lot of time to configure. It takes a lot of time to set up. Even if you have an external code editor, you still need to set up the applet to actually be able to submit the solutions. So it does not matter if you have an external code editor in that sense, because you still need to set it up. Still need to open the applet to submit. You still need the applet to do the other parts of the competition. So to, like, for example, view others' solutions or see your own scores, you will need it for that. So which is why we don't really recommend Topcoder for beginners, because of how much of an effort it is to actually sit down and configure the web applet. Debugging is painful. Again, debugging, usually making random test cases helps. We might GDB is something that can be used. I don't think anyone has seriously used GDB in competitions. I don't recall it. We usually it depends on the problem. You try to first figure out till where your code is running. You try to figure out, try using larger sample data, try using larger test data to figure out what's going wrong. There are things beyond that as well. I have done Java in my 12th. You will be doing, so the thing is, you will be doing C++. So the thing is that you will be doing C in ESE 101. So it's not like you will not know C. And once you know that basic amount of C, it's much easier to switch to C++. C++ over C is simply because C++ in some senses is a more enhanced version of C. You can do it in C, but there's no reason to do it in, there's no fundamental functionality in C that is not available in C++. And C++ will also contain a lot of libraries which have a lot of helpful things. So you can do, at least, I mean, Darshi can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that if you take a piece of code that you've written in C and you use it in a C++ compiler, it should run. So there's really no good reason to use C over C++. Other than pointers, I think, yeah, but you'll never use pointers anyway. So yeah, that's majorly it. If there are any other questions, I can't see any. Darshi, do you have any?
Not yet.
Yeah, this is much more painful doing it over Zoom or Meet than live, because I have exactly zero feedback of how slow or fast I'm going. Is there anything we missed? Do we emphasize more on money? So one way competitive programming also helps is that, again, because it's a tech thing, for some reasons, um, there is some amount of money involved. I think you can find videos on YouTube where people will discuss how they've made money through competitive programming. A lot of the competitions, there are a lot of competition which have cash prizes, a lot of competitions which have tech prizes, as in they'll give you some piece of tech if you win. There is quite a bit of money if you actually sit down and make problems for other people to solve. There's some money if you actually become an instructor on websites or make videos on your own explaining topics. So in that sense, there is it's a lucrative thing to do if you're if you're in college, even if you're not, like, I mean, I don't want to advise, like, pitch it as such, but it's a way to make some amount of pocket money if you're in college and you're slightly good at it. There's no, someone asked it, but there's no bias in branch when it comes to competitive programming. So there's very little benefit. I mean, almost there's some, not a lot, benefit to being in a certain branch. If you're used to competitive programming platforms, then it's fine. This is majorly if you're not. It's tough having a presentation which focuses on things for, people with a different amount of experiences. This is supposed to be a dummy's guide to competitive programming. If you have absolutely zero idea of where to start, you just what website, what code, where do I code, things like that. If you're used to competitive programming platforms other than Codeforces, it's fine. But Codeforces, AdCoder, and maybe Topcoder as well are the gold standard when it comes to competitive programming, at least in terms of regular competitions. There are a few more esoteric websites which are more focused on advanced problems, but you may not need that for now, so it doesn't really matter. HackerRank, Hacker Earth are, again, they have an irregular amount of competitions. The problems may be too difficult, may not be very properly written, or they may be straight out wrong. So it's not the best experience to do it. CodeChef is also one of the ones I would recommend. At least as a beginner, it has its own ID, so it's very friendly. But it doesn't have a lot of people participating as compared to Codeforces. So one benefit of Codeforces is that given that almost everyone who does competitive programming at a serious enough level does it, you have a nice guide to understand how well you're performing. CodeChef, the rankings, the ratings are much more volatile solely because the number of because the number of people that give it are not that many. Code is scanning more number of interior than number of scanf. That is something I can't answer right now. We probably might have intro sessions to basic tips. I mean, once you start coding, once you've gone through a few problems, there might be another lecture on things to do after that, but I can't. The stars and rank matter on a resume. Not very, I would say, unless your rank is extremely good. I think at least in Kanpur, what ends up happening is that most people take part in some competitions and most people have some sort of rank. What I think interviewers tend to notice is ICPC or I think majorly ICPC is one that's recognized. Other ranks may not be as recognized. And they end up, if there is a company that looks at your ranks anyway, they will be asking programming questions to test your ability. So there's no easy way out in that matter. Do companies in interviews focus on certificates, skills, certificates? In an IIT Kanpur context, certificates don't matter at all. There's zero benefit to certificates, and good skills in programming, as long as you have a semi-respectable CPI and you've done some amount of projects which are relevant, at least in whatever you're applying for, it should be fine. But there's you shouldn't really expect that CP will carry you all the way through, but it's definitely something that will carry you a lot through the interviews. Yeah. Is there anything else? Tashi, do you want to end this, or should we wait for a few more minutes till figure out something? Or do I start the drams rant?
Maybe we can wait 1 or 2 more minutes before we end this.
Wait, you can cut out
If
stuff from the end of the YouTube live, right? So I can start on a drams rant and people will know.
no, we cannot do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we can do that.
You're not sure if I can start a drams rant and what else? What else do we miss? Kanpur mein, is there anything else we missed? You have the monthly programming contest. If we're not lazy, we should have lectures, hopefully. And if we will have lectures, Aryan saying, oh, एक disclaimer चला दो. So we will try to get lectures done, hopefully. And mic is off. Okay, your mic is off.
No,
mine's not. Right. Other than that, technique ho nahi raha, so I'm not sure if you have technique ho nahi raha, right, इस बार. So you don't have black box or you don't have
नो ब्लैक बॉक्स हो गया, वी हैड टेक वीक, उसमें ब्लैक बॉक्स करवाया हमने.
nice, nice black box. हो गया. Code. What was the other one? Code Fest, na? We won't have
हाँ
Code
कोड,
Fest, I guess.
नो वी वोंट हैव कोड फेस्ट. कोड फेस्ट usually involve senior people, so we
Uh,
can't have that for freshers.
Code Fest. Other than that, Code Fest नहीं होगा तो क्या होगा? That's majorly it. तकनीक तो हो नहीं रहा, so वो नहीं होता. Tech Week is kind of a new concept because of COVID. I have zero idea of what Tech Week is, so I just understand it's something. Freshers, AI ML, yeah, don't ask me. I have zero idea about AI and ML, and I am very proud about the fact I have zero idea about AI and ML. Competitive programming is absolutely useless for AI and ML, so you probably would not gain much. PClub will answer that question. What other things than CP? What else am I missing that I can talk about? I think one thing that kind of gets underrated is the fact that I think people do not understand how well IIT Kanpur is doing in comparative programming compared to other fields. Like, because they're all under one club, and I mean they're all in one campus, you may feel that what IIT Kanpur is doing in, say, cultural activities is kind of impressive, but it's hard to it's like hard to understand how much of an impact IIT Kanpur has on comparative programming compared to much of the smaller fields. IIT Kanpur has been going to the world finals, I think, consecutively for the last 8 years, so 8 teams from India qualify for the world finals every year, and IIT Kanpur has been one of those 8 teams for the last 8 years. This is every college in India can participate, and IIT Kanpur is the top college, one of the top 8 colleges every year. And this is not by through, say, the skin of your teeth or whatever. This is proper dominance in the sense that we are usually the first or second college in that. The top rated Indian coder on the top rated Indian coder on these websites was from IIT Kanpur for a really long time. And yeah, world finals wala rank nahi puchna hai. That is something that will not be discussed. But we did come first in the regional, both the regionals that were held last year and the Asia West regionals. World finals did not happen because of COVID. They will happen this year, and depending on whether or not COVID is better. And yeah, again, the top coder has always been someone from IIT Kanpur has been at the top of the across the country for the last 8 years. You had Atanu being the number one. Chandani has been number one for a year and a half or so. And that's not something you will see easily in any other field. At least you can contact people for specific problems. Once you're in Code Forces, or wherever you're doing the problem, you can see who has solved the problem. And it would be ideal that you ask them. If anyone in IIT Kanpur, there shouldn't be an issue if you ask them upfront that how did you solve this problem. Otherwise, the people on the list are people you can contact in case of other issues. But yeah, I think like you'll have fests that come and go, people, and fest wale aayenge bolenge that we had the best fest in the XYZ years, which is not exactly true. You'll have, the cultural clubs or something maybe, and a lot of the tech clubs also say they came first in some competition. But again, they may not be the Sanani CSE ka tha. Why do people end up asking branches anyway? Right. Do not avoid cheating and avoid asking for hints to problems that are already going on. I mean, if it's a contest that's already going on, probably should not ask for it, because people are doing it for fun, and it's not fun if, everyone has the solutions because they ask someone else. So try avoiding that. But right, where was I in the rant? Right. So effectively, lots of clubs will tell you that they won some random local competition, which again may sound impressive. They'll say that it helps in your resume, which may or may not be true. But competitive programming is something where IIT Kanpur has been consistently at the top. Competitive programming is something where if you're extremely well at it, it's a short way to get a decent internship or a decent company in placements. And yeah, that's kind of it. Darshi, should we end this? I see no other questions.
We can end this now.
Cool. Thank you for attending this very erratic talk. It's slightly tough giving lectures without seeing anyone, but I hope you enjoyed it. The slides should be shared. HackerRank, you're using HackerRank, good for you. It has a nice UI, but you may be it's fun, but you may want to shift to code forces eventually if you plan on taking competitive programming seriously. And yeah, hope you guys learned something or have understood a bit more about competitive programming. Cool. We stop.
One more thing. I'll just add the links in the description of this video after a few minutes.
यार कॉपी कब बनाना पड़ेगा ना आई थिंक ठीक है cool. Cool. End it whenever you feel like it, and then we can add Aryan to the call.